Welcome back to the Form Factor. If you're just joining us, well, we had a good look through the time form ratings for the older horses in the first half of the show with Jamie Lynch. Time to turn our attentions now to the 3-year-olds. And after desperately trying to squeeze a pee-in out of Jamie for the older horses, we've got plenty of them here with the 3-year-olds, as you'd expect. So we'll start with the top horse here, devastatingly impressive in the Irish Guineas. Kingman, 129 with the P, and more to come.
Yeah, Kingman, as well as several of those horses. These are big ratings, Gina, for this time of year for 3-year-olds. We've got a bunch, certainly a collection, of high-class horses who, certainly like Kingman, amongst others, are going to get better, you would feel, because this was very easy, wasn't it? It was very easy from at the weekend in the Irish Guineas.
Conditions that weren't expected to suit him.
And to think that John Gosden walked the track beforehand and only gave him the go-ahead because he was worried about the ground. Now, look at it, his burst of speed at the end. This, allied to his win in the Greenham, twice he's looked a superstar miler. In between, whatever the reason, whatever the nuances of the race, you get the impression that he wasn't quite in exactly the same blinding form at Newmarket, but certainly both Richard Hannon, trainer of Night Thunder, and Aidan O'Brien, trainer of Australia, will be very pleased with that result, because not only him, but Shifting Power too, proved that the 2,000 guineas at Newmarket was exactly what we thought it was, i.e. a very, very strong renewal.
And going into the 2,000 guineas, did we think we had a strong crop of 3-year-olds, or have they come out and subsequently surprised us somewhat?
No, I think that there were, even through the winter, we suspected that these horses were certainly above average, even for this time of year. And
there was a lot of unexposed sorts coming into it, though, that we'd seen once or twice as 2-year-olds. I mean, obviously we had the Racing Post Trophy winner, but it's not often, for example, you get a Dewhurst horse in War Command who's in the ratings here, going off at such a big price for the Guineas.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, I suppose the difference between this year and other years is that most of the hype horses have in fact delivered. They've come out and delivered on their promise and their burgeoning reputations. Australia for one, Kingman certainly for another. So that's possibly the difference. Normally we're a bit let down, aren't we, by some horses who are talking horses who do everything on the gallops but don't reproduce it on the track. But we've got a collection of up-and-coming horses, and Kingman, according to us, has shown the most ability of any 3-year-old, and it's hard to argue with it really when you see what he did in Ireland, isn't it?
Yeah, now what is interesting is Australia would very much fit into a similar mould on what we saw from him in the Guineas, and he duly has the P. But Night of Thunder, 126, you don't think there's more to come from him?
Yeah, you put me on the spot here, Gina. I wasn't really prepared for this. And there is that case, of course, of saying this is a means of handicapping. You can go back and say, well, Night of Thunder beat Kingman, Kingman has improved, and therefore let's bump up Night of Thunder's rating to keep that relationship. And it's hard to argue that Night of Thunder wasn't the best horse in that race, considering that he went from one side of the track to the other and still beat both Kingman and Australia. But he still just has it to prove for us that that win was all it looked at the time, was all it's cracked up to be. And I think that under different circumstances there might have been a different result to that Newmarket Guineas. But it's a conundrum, and it's going to be one of the biggest draws going into the St James's Palace, isn't it, at Royal Ascot? It's the rematch between Kingman and between Night of Thunder. And of course, in the meantime, Australia might well have won the Derby.
Yeah,
probably will have.
It's fascinating, isn't it? One of the big puzzles of the season to come at Royal Ascot. We'll take a look at some of the sprinters as well then, because we've got ratings for them. You mentioned Hot Streak earlier on in the programme, and he was very impressive at Haydock on Saturday. Yeah,
Hot Streak is one of two Kevin Ryan horses, Kevin Ryan 3-year-olds, who were unusually high in the 3-year-old rankings, and both Hot Streak and Astaire have shown a high level of ability, and one which suggests they can break that mould and become a 3-year-old who impacts in the all-age sprints. Now, this is last year in the Cornwallis, and the reason why this is so relevant is that it was at Ascot, and look at how he demolishes that field and how he handles Ascot so expertly and so proficiently, and that's a big tick in his box. Combined with what he did at the weekend, it was pretty frightening how he dispatched of those horses. The way he went away in that penultimate furlong, and it was fitting, wasn't it, that he was ridden by Oisin Murphy, who was unable to claim in the race, but Oisin Murphy, the rising star amongst the jockeys, and certainly Hot Streak, the rising star amongst the sprinters. And with that back form at Ascot, and with what he's done, and the waxen lyrical that Kevin Ryan was doing after about this horse, he's going to be very, very hard to beat in the King's Stand Stakes, with or without a strong overseas challenge.
Yeah, he's trained some good ones. He knows a good one when he sees it, Kevin Ryan, so we'll keep an eye on Hot Streak. And a few French horses in here to discuss. It looks like you've got Ecto rated the top of those, who, of course, got the better of Caraconti.
Yeah, Ecto, the only time he was beaten was by Caraconti on his debut. Both were making the debut as 2-year-olds, and he actually beat Caraconti in the trial for the French Guineas before Caraconti went on and won that. Ecto has met with a setback which ruled him out of the French Guineas and might well rule him out of the French Derby, but he is a serious horse if and when they can get him back. War Command is becoming a bit of a conundrum, isn't he? He was entered due to run in the Irish Guineas. They pulled him out because of the ground. Amongst his entries is the Diamond Jubilee at Royal Ascot. 6 furlongs. You wouldn't necessarily put that with his performances compared with last year, but I know that Aidan O'Brien's been talking about headgear for this horse because he feels that he's just gone a bit lazy on him and needs to sharpen him up. But it's fascinating, all the horses in here. The full story about each one is yet to be revealed, isn't it, really? And that's why, at this time of year, is so enthralling to us all and why we all love racing, I'm afraid.
Certainly, and while we're on the subject of the 3-year-olds, let's just throw in the American California Chrome, who's bidding for a Triple Crown this weekend in the Belmont Stakes. Already performed to a high level, I imagine, on the Timeform ratings with wins in the Kentucky Derby and the Preakness, and of course this is the true test of a thoroughbred on Saturday.
Yeah, so it's 3 decades at least since we had a Triple Crown winner in America, and it is very, very demanding because of the short space of time in which the 3 races come. Now, several horses have got this far as he has, won the first 2 and have fallen down at the last leg. But he looks something different. He looks the one who was able to snap history and just breathe life back into that Triple Crown. Do you know what they call his followers in America? They're called Chromies.
Chromies,
yeah,
love it.
That's good. And there's a few stories emerging about him all the time, isn't there?
Yeah, it's great. He really captures the American public imagination. The Racing Post reporting this morning that when he won the Kentucky Derby, his saddlecloth was spelt wrong. It was actually California Chrome. So, being very superstitious, they've decided to stick with that. They stuck with it for the Preakness. He was California Chrome, so we might have to rebrand him. And they've got 2 saddlecloths to choose from for Saturday's Belmont. So if you're watching it, and it is live here on At the Races, look out for whether he's going to be California Chrome or California Chrome. But either way, he's a very good horse.
I kind of hope it's California Chrome because it's his little gimmick, it's a little side story. It would be good for him to carry that right through and for a mistake to become almost legend. So that's him. We must very briefly, while we're on the 3-year-olds, talk about Marvellous, who of course won the Irish 1,000 Guineas, a bit out of the blue, a bit out of left field, but that's not unusual for Aidan O'Brien horse, and she is all systems go, you would think, now for the Oaks. And look at this performance, Gina. She comes from the back. It was only a 3rd run. She's still very, very green, and she's well on top by the end. Ryan Moore rode her this day. And
at this stage, I think 100 to 1 in running she touched at one stage, and you can see why, can't you?
It's not surprising, is it? Because she's got a lot of ground to make up. She has to circle the whole field. But there's 2 really striking things about this performance. Firstly is the way she comes through, and secondly is the way she finishes off. It certainly points to her being suited, well suited, by a 1.5 miles. She's of course by Galileo, which is a big plus in her box regards a 1.5 miles. And we are students of time as well as form, hence the Timeform name. This was almost 2 seconds quicker than Kingman ran the 2,000 Guineas in, which is a good pointer to the race and a big marker towards her potential. So you can see that as the Oaks approaches, she's going to continue to snowball. That initial momentum has gathered, but Marvellous suddenly front and centre for the Oaks, and not the first Aidan O'Brien horse to sort of come from left field and burst onto the scene. She's really good.
Yeah, it could be a repeat of Imagine, who I think did the double, didn't she, in the same colours, and as you say, regally bred by Galileo out of a sister to Giant's Causeway. So Marvellous continues to gather momentum for the Oaks.